I sat at the grand dining table, surrounded by Ethan's family, my fingers lightly brushing against the thick envelope resting on my lap. The weight of it was nothing compared to the storm it was about to unleash. Crystal glasses clinked, voices mingled in laughter, and the scent of roasted lamb filled the air. It was the perfect picture of a happy family. The perfect lie. Ethan sat at the head of the table, his hazel eyes sparkling under the chandelier's golden glow. He was charming as ever, flashing his signature smile at his parents, at his sister, at me. But I knew better. That smile had deceived me for years, luring me into a life that was nothing more than a beautifully wrapped betrayal. Margaret, his mother, beamed with pride. "Emma, dear, I must say, 5 years with my son and you still look as radiant as the first day I met you. You take such good care of him." I forced a soft smile. "Thank you, Margaret. It has certainly been an eventful 5 years." Ethan turned to me, his hand reaching for mine. I let him take it, let him play his role. The perfect husband, the devoted man. He had no idea that this was his last performance. 5 years, he said, raising his glass. "Emma, you've made me the happiest man alive." A shiver ran down my spine, not from love, not from sentimentality, but from the sheer audacity of his words. The same lips that kissed me in the mornings had whispered secrets to another woman at night. The same hands that held mine had traced the curves of a mistress for half a decade. My grip tightened around the envelope, my pulse steady. "Not yet." Ethan's father, Richard, gave a hearty laugh. "Well, let's toast to 5 more years of happiness, shall we?" I bit the inside of my cheek, suppressing a smirk. 5 more years? I don't think so. Lily, my best friend, sat across from me, her gaze locking onto mine for a fraction of a second. He knew. She had been the only one I trusted with the truth, the only one who knew that tonight wasn't just an anniversary, it was an execution. I cleared my throat, lifting my glass. To 5 unforgettable years. Ethan grinned, oblivious. And to many more. I smiled back, a slow, knowing smile. "Oh, Ethan, I guarantee you'll never forget this night." Margaret tilted her head, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "That almost sounds like a surprise, dear." I tapped my fingers on the envelope. "You could say that." The moment was close. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't tremble. I had rehearsed this in my mind 100 times. Every smirk, every condescending word Ethan had ever spoken, every late-night excuse he had fed me, it all led to this. I waited for the perfect pause, the moment where the room fell silent, where all eyes were on me. And then, with a deliberate motion, I reached beneath the table, pulled out the envelope and placed it right in front of Ethan. "Happy anniversary, my love." He frowned, his fingers hesitating before picking it up. The room was still, filled only with the soft clinking of silverware and the distant hum of conversation from the next room. He opened it. His face paled. The silence shattered. Ethan's fingers trembled as he pulled the crisp papers from the envelope. His hazel eyes darted across the page, and for the first time in our marriage I saw true panic flicker behind them. His jaw tightened, his Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Margaret leaned forward, her perfectly manicured hands resting on the table. "Ethan, dear, what is it?" Ethan didn't answer. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. I could almost hear the gears in his mind turning, searching for a way to smooth this over, to manipulate the situation as he always had. But there was no escape this time. The silence stretched until Richard, his father, grew impatient. "Well, what's wrong, son?" I crossed my arms, leaning back in my chair. "He's just a little surprised." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Go on, Ethan. Read it out loud." His eyes snapped up to mine, pleading silently. "Not here. Not in front of them." I smiled. "Sir." He inhaled sharply, gripping the papers so tightly his knuckles turned white. His voice came out low, hoarse. "Petition for dissolution of marriage." A gasp echoed from across the table. His sister, Charlotte. Margaret's eyes widened in horror, while Richard simply furrowed his brows. Margaret clutched her pearl necklace, her voice tight. "Emma, surely this is a joke?" I let out a small, breathy laugh. "Oh, Margaret, I would never joke about something so important." I leaned forward, locking eyes with Ethan. "This is very real." Ethan finally found his voice. "Emma, can we talk about this privately?" I tilted my head. "Privately? Oh, Ethan, after all these years, I am the last person you should be asking for privacy. His face drained of color. He knew. He knew I wasn't just here to quietly sign some papers and walk away. I wanted them to see him for what he truly was. Margaret's hands clenched into fists. I don't understand. Emma, why would you do something so drastic? I let out a soft sigh, shaking my head. Margaret, let me ask you something. When your son calls and tells you he's working late, do you believe him? Her brows knit together. Of course. I nodded slowly. And when he goes on his business trips? When he forgets your birthday or cancels last-minute plans? He stiffened. He has responsibilities. Responsibilities, I repeated, a bitter taste in my mouth. Yes, he does. Like spending 5 years with another woman. The room fell into stunned silence. Charlotte covered her mouth, shaking her head in disbelief. No, that's not true. Margaret turned to Ethan, her voice a trembling whisper. Tell me she's lying. Ethan remained frozen, gripping the papers in his hands like they were his lifeline. She's lying, right? Margaret pressed. Richard slammed his fist on the table. For God's sake, Ethan, say something. But Ethan wasn't looking at his parents. He was looking at me. And in his eyes I saw it, the realization that everything was slipping away from him. I leaned in just slightly, my voice quiet but firm. 5 years, Ethan. Did you really think I didn't know? His lips parted, but before he could say a word, his phone buzzed loudly against the wooden table. I already knew whose name was flashing on the screen. And now, so did everyone else. The room was suffocatingly silent, all eyes glued to the phone vibrating on the table. The name Lauren flashed on the screen, burning like a brand into the thick tension in the air. Margaret let out a strangled gasp. Charlotte's face twisted in shock. Richard's knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the table. Ethan, pale as a ghost, lunged for the phone, but I was faster. I snatched it before his fingers could reach, holding it up for everyone to see. Shall I answer? I mused, tilting my head. Or would you like to explain why another woman is calling you right now? Emma, Ethan said through gritted teeth, voice low like he could still control this. Give me the phone. I raised an eyebrow. Or what? His nostrils flared. He was unraveling. Margaret turned to her son, her voice shaky. Ethan, tell me this isn't real. Tell me it's a misunderstanding. A bitter chuckle escaped my lips. A misunderstanding? That's what I had told myself in the beginning too. I placed the phone down, ignoring the persistent buzzing, and met Margaret's pleading eyes. You want to know the truth? Fine. Let me tell you how it all started. 5 years ago. It was little things at first. Nothing outright suspicious, just small shifts. Ethan had always been a man of routine. He worked late, but he always texted. He had business trips, but he always called before bed. He spent time on his phone but never hid it from me. Then one day those habits started to change. I remember the first moment I felt it, the first seed of doubt. It was a Tuesday night. I had made dinner, his favorite, steak with garlic butter and roasted vegetables. I poured 2 glasses of wine, expecting him any minute. But he was late. Not unusual. What was unusual was the text I received at 9:42 p.m. Ethan, working late. Don't wait up. I stared at my phone, something inside me twisting. Ethan had sent messages like this before, but this one felt different. There was no love you. No sorry babe. Just cold, flat words. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overthinking. But then it happened again. And again. And again. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't just coming home late. He was distant. His kisses felt hollow, his touches perfunctory. When I asked about his day, he gave vague answers. Then came the deleted messages. I caught him one night, lying in bed beside me, quickly swiping something off his screen before I could see. Ethan? I asked, keeping my voice light. He barely glanced at me. Work stuff. I should have pressed. I should have asked more. But instead I let it slide. And that was my first mistake. The evidence begins to pile up. Weeks passed and the doubts kept growing. Perfume on his shirt. Not mine. A dinner charge on his credit card. For 2. A hotel stay, booked in his name, but he never mentioned traveling. I felt like I was losing my mind. So I did something I had never done before. I went through his phone. It was locked, of course. But one night while he was asleep, I waited. I waited until he turned over in bed, and in the soft blue glow of the screen, I gently placed his thumb against it. It unlocked. And then I saw everything. Texts, calls, photos. Lauren. Her name was everywhere. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't just a mistake. It was 5 years of messages. 5 years of secrets. 5 years. And that's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. Not until I could make sure he felt the exact same betrayal I did. The phone on the table finally stopped buzzing. I looked up at Ethan, my expression calm, my voice steady. "Do you remember that night, Ethan?" I asked. "The first night you lied to me?" His face was stone. His silence was deafening. Margaret turned to him, her voice shaking. "Ethan, please. Tell me this isn't true." He swallowed hard. "Mom, I let out a soft laugh. "Oh, now you want to explain?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Then by all means, Ethan. Tell them everything." But he couldn't. Because he knew. He knew that this was only the beginning. Ethan's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes darted around the table, searching for an escape, an excuse, something, anything, to stop the truth from spilling further. But it was too late. Margaret's face had lost all its color. Her hands, usually so composed, trembled as she placed them on the table. "Ethan." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is it true?" The moment stretched, the weight of it suffocating. Then finally he exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. "Mom, listen, it's a yes or no," I cut in. My voice was calm, but inside something burned. "That's all we need, Ethan. Did you or did you not cheat on me for 5 years?" His jaw clenched. A muscle in his cheek twitched. I saw the war in his mind, the desperate urge to lie, to manipulate, to salvage whatever he could. And then, just barely above a whisper, he admitted it. "Yes." Margaret let out a strangled gasp, pressing a hand to her chest as if the breath had been knocked from her lungs. Charlotte's chair scraped against the floor as she pushed back, shaking her head. Richard's expression darkened, his fury barely contained beneath the surface. Lily, sitting across from me, didn't look shocked. She had known this was coming. But even she couldn't hide the flicker of anger that passed through her eyes. I tilted my head, staring at Ethan as if I were studying a stranger. 5 years, I murmured. "You never once thought I'd find out?" Ethan scoffed, rubbing his temples. "Of course I thought you'd find out, Emma. But He stopped himself, shaking his head. "This isn't how I wanted you to know." A sharp laugh escaped my lips. "Oh, I'm sorry. Would you have preferred if I found out privately? So you could feed me some half-baked excuse? So you could twist things until somehow I was the one to blame?" Margaret turned to me, her voice trembling. But you stayed." The question was unspoken, but I heard it loud and clear. "If you knew, why didn't you leave?" Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He had probably asked himself the same thing. Why had I stayed? Why had I spent years playing the part of the oblivious, doting wife? I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Because I wanted to know who I was really married to. My eyes met Ethan's, cold and unwavering. "And I needed to see how far you'd go." His head snapped up, his brows furrowing. "What the hell does that mean?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "It means, Ethan, that I've been watching. I've been waiting." I tapped my nails against the table. "You thought you had control of this game, but you never even realized I was playing too." Margaret blinked rapidly, struggling to process. You mean you knew for years?" I turned to her, my expression unreadable. "Oh, Margaret. I didn't just know. I collected everything." Ethan's body tensed. "What do you mean, everything?" I reached into my purse and pulled out a second envelope, dropping it onto the table. This one was thicker, heavier. I saw his throat bob as he swallowed hard. Inside were printouts of every hotel receipt, every text message, every photo I had found. Copies of his credit card statements, screenshots of his late-night calls. Ethan's hand hovered over the envelope but didn't touch it. "You see," I continued, "I didn't want just a divorce. I wanted to ruin you." Richard exhaled sharply, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Jesus Christ, Ethan." Margaret was shaking her head, muttering under her breath. "This can't be happening. This can't be happening." Ethan finally spoke, his voice laced with frustration. "Emma, what do you want? You want an apology? Fine. I'm sorry, all right." I raised an eyebrow. "You're sorry?" "Yes." His voice rose, his hands gesturing wildly. I made a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake. But you're my wife. We're supposed to work through things like this, not? Oh, don't you dare, I snapped, slamming my hands onto the table. Don't you dare act like this is something that can be fixed. You didn't make a mistake, Ethan. You made thousands of them. You made calculated choices for 5 years. And you did it while looking me in the eye, telling me you loved me. He opened his mouth, but I wasn't finished. You don't get to stand there and play the victim, I spat. You don't get to pretend that this is something we can just work through. You ended this marriage the moment you touched her. I'm just the one making it official. Ethan inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed. A short, humorless sound. And yet here we are. Silence. Ethan's head dropped forward, his hands gripping his hair. He was unraveling, and for the first time in our marriage I enjoyed watching him struggle. Margaret turned to me again, desperation in her eyes. Emma, please, I know my son has made mistakes, but surely. No, my voice was firm, unwavering. There is no fixing this, Margaret. Ethan suddenly looked up, his hazel eyes sharp with something close to fear. And that's when it hit him. This wasn't just about divorce. This was about destroying him. He finally understood. And I smiled. Because he had no idea how much more I had left to say. Ethan's hands curled into fists on the table, his chest rising and falling in short, sharp breaths. I could see it. The panic creeping in, the realization that he was no longer in control of the situation. He had spent years lying, manipulating, covering his tracks, all while assuming I would remain blind and obedient. But now the script had flipped. Margaret looked between us, her face a mask of disbelief. Emma, I know you're hurt, but we can talk about this. No, I cut her off, my voice calm but firm. We're done talking. I turned my gaze back to Ethan. I have nothing left to say to you. This, I gestured between us, is over. I'm done pretending, done letting you humiliate me while you sneak around behind my back. Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose, his fingers gripping the divorce papers like they might dissolve if he held them tight enough. You don't understand, he muttered. It wasn't supposed to be like this. A dry laugh escaped my lips. Oh, and how exactly was it supposed to be? He shook his head, eyes darting around like he was searching for an answer that wouldn't come. I thought we'd move past it. I blinked slowly. Move past it. His jaw tightened. Yes. I made mistakes, okay? But I thought if I just kept things the way they were, if I kept our life stable, we could. You mean if I kept playing the fool? I interrupted, leaning forward. If I kept smiling, kept pretending? If I continued being the perfect wife while you lived a double life? Ethan stayed silent. Margaret clutched her pearls tighter as if that would somehow steady her. Emma, please, she whispered. Marriage is about forgiveness. I turned to her, meeting her pleading eyes. Forgiveness. A bitter smile played on my lips. Forgiveness is for mistakes, Margaret. Not for 5 years of deliberate betrayal. Charlotte finally found her voice, speaking up for the first time since Ethan's confession. So that's it? You're just going to throw everything away? I tilted my head. Throw everything away? I repeated as if testing the words. No, Charlotte. Ethan threw everything away. I'm just making sure he watches it burn. Richard, who had been silent this entire time, finally let out a heavy sigh. Jesus Christ, he muttered under his breath, rubbing his temples. Ethan groaned, rubbing his hands over his face. God, I messed up, okay? I know that. But do you really have to do this here? Like this? I sat back in my chair, my smile slow and deliberate. Yes. His face twisted in frustration, but before he could say anything else, his phone buzzed again. This time it didn't just vibrate. Pray. And the name flashing across the screen? Lorne. Silence stretched across the table, thick and suffocating. Richard's jaw tightened. Charlotte's face paled. Margaret let out a horrified gasp. And Ethan? He looked ruined. I reached forward, grabbed the phone and turned it toward him. You should answer. His nostrils flared, his expression darkening. Emma, don't. I pressed the green button. The sound of a woman's voice filled the air. Ethan, why aren't you picking up? I've been trying to reach you all night. The color drained from his face. Lauren kept talking, oblivious to the fact that she was now on speakerphone in front of his entire family. "Baby, I don't know why you're ignoring me, but I just wanted to say I miss you. Also, when are you coming over? You promised we'd." Ethan lunged for the phone, but I pulled it back, pressing end call before she could say anything else. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret looked like she might faint. Charlotte covered her mouth with both hands, eyes wide with shock. Richard just sat there, shaking his head in quiet disappointment. And Ethan? He had nothing left to say. I placed the phone down, exhaling slowly before looking up at him. "I wonder," I mused. "What do you think she'd say if she knew where you were right now?" Ethan slammed a fist onto the table. "Enough." I barely flinched. I had seen him angry before. I had seen him lie, manipulate, twist words to make himself the victim. But this time he had no excuses left. I pushed my chair back, standing slowly. "You don't get to be mad, Ethan." His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Defeat. Lily stood as well, ready to follow me. She had been silent this whole time, letting me handle things the way I needed to, but now she spoke. "Come on, Em," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You don't need to waste another second here." I nodded, turning to leave. But before I did, I glanced back at Ethan one last time. "You lied to me for 5 years," I said quietly. "You made me believe we had something real. But tonight, you get to know what it feels like to lose." With that, I walked out. And I didn't look back. The cold night air hit my skin as I stepped out of the house, the distant hum of the city blending with the sound of my own heartbeat. My hands still trembled slightly, not from fear, not from regret, but from the sheer weight of everything I had just done. Lily was beside me in an instant, her heels clicking against the pavement as she matched my pace. Neither of us spoke for a moment. She simply walked next to me as if waiting for me to process the storm I had unleashed. When we reached my car, I exhaled, my breath visible in the chilly air. "That was brutal," Lily finally said, leaning against the passenger door. "Even for him." I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "Not brutal enough." She turned to me, tilting her head. "You okay?" I met her gaze, my lips pressing together. Was I okay? 5 years of betrayal, 5 years of playing a role in a life that wasn't real. 5 years of knowing but waiting, holding on to something that had already turned to ash. I thought back to the look on Ethan's face, the way his entire world had crumbled in front of him, the way his mother, his biggest defender, had looked at him with nothing but shame. I had imagined this moment for so long, had played it over and over in my head, but now that it had happened, now that I had finally broken free, I felt light. Like a weight I didn't even realize I had been carrying was suddenly gone. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I am." Lily studied me for a second before nodding back. "Good. Because if you had any doubts, I was ready to remind you why that bastard deserved every second of it." A chuckle escaped me, the first genuine one of the night. "I bet you were." She sighed, crossing her arms. "So, what now?" No. That was the real question, wasn't it? For so long my life had revolved around Ethan. Loving him, doubting him, watching him. Even when I knew the truth, I had stayed in his orbit, waiting for the right moment to strike. Now that it was over, now that I had handed him those divorce papers, now that the entire house behind me was probably still reeling from the fallout. What came next? I looked up at the sky, inhaling deeply. The answer came easier than I expected. "Now," I said, "I start over." Lily smiled, nudging me. "Damn right you do." I unlocked the car and we both climbed in. The moment the door shut, it felt final. Like the closing of a chapter, the end of a book I never wanted to read again. As I turned the key in the ignition, my phone vibrated in my purse. A part of me already knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. Ethan. I let it ring. Then I blocked his number. Lily let out a dramatic gasp. "Damn, that felt good just watching you do it." I smirked. "Trust me, it felt even better doing it." She pulled on her seatbelt. "All right, where to?" "I say we get drinks. You deserve a celebration." A celebration. I hadn't thought of it that way, but maybe she was right. Tonight wasn't about mourning what was lost. It was about reclaiming what had been taken from me. I shifted the car into gear. "Drinks it is." As we pulled away from the house, I didn't look back. I had spent too long trapped in the past. It was time to start living for the future. The bar was dimly lit, a low hum of conversation filling the air, blending with the soft melody of jazz playing through the speakers. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where people came to drown their sorrows or celebrate their victories. Tonight I was here for the latter. Lily slid a cocktail in front of me, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. I picked up mine, letting the cold condensation cool my fingertips before clinking it against hers. "To freedom." The first sip was smooth, the burn a welcome sensation down my throat. I had expected to feel different. Maybe guilt. Maybe sadness. Maybe some tiny flicker of doubt over how I had just detonated my marriage in front of a room full of people. But instead all I felt was relief. Lily swirled the ice in her glass, studying me over the rim. "So, what's the plan now?" I exhaled slowly, tracing the rim of my glass with my finger. That was the question, wasn't it? For years, my entire life had been built around Ethan. Loving him, doubting him, watching him, planning my revenge. Now that it was over, I had a blank slate. "I don't know," I admitted. "But for the first time in a long time, that doesn't scare me." Lily grinned. "That's the spirit." She took another sip, then leaned in. "All right, but real talk. What do you think he's doing right now?" I let out a soft laugh. "Spiraling." I could picture it perfectly. Ethan sitting in that dining room, his parents still in stunned silence, his sister glaring at him like he was a stranger. The phone calls from Lauren that he wouldn't know how to answer. The weight of everything finally crashing down on him. He had spent years lying, sneaking around, thinking he had control. No, he had nothing. Lily tapped her nails against her glass. "Think he's tried calling you again?" "He did once," I said. "Blocked him." Her eyes widened with approval. "Oh, I love that for you." I chuckled, shaking my head. But before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed again. Lily's gaze flickered to it, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "If that's him, I swear to God." "It's not," I said, my stomach tightening as I read the name on the screen. "Margaret." Lily raised an eyebrow. "Oh, that's interesting." I hesitated for a moment before setting my glass down and answering. "Hello." There was silence on the other end, just the faint sound of breathing. Then finally her voice came through, quieter than I had ever heard it before. "Emma." I leaned back in my seat, my fingers tightening around the phone. "Margaret." More silence. Then, "I didn't know." I exhaled slowly, my grip loosening slightly. "I know." A shaky breath. "I don't know what to say." I let the words hang between us, waiting. She was the one who had spent years defending Ethan, the one who had convinced herself that her son was the perfect husband, the perfect man. And now that illusion had been shattered. Margaret cleared her throat. I should have seen it. I should have noticed." I closed my eyes for a second. Would it have changed anything? Another silence. Then softly, "Maybe not." I pressed my lips together, glancing at Lily, who was watching me with mild intrigue, sipping her drink like this was the most entertaining movie she'd ever seen. Margaret finally spoke again, her voice firmer this time. "I just wanted you to know. I don't blame you for what you did." I blinked, caught off guard. "That night," she hesitated. "You were right. There's no fixing this." I swallowed, unsure of what to say. I had expected anger. Resentment. But this. Margaret inhaled sharply. "He's a mess. He won't admit it, but I can see it. He knows he lost you." I exhaled slowly. "Good." Another pause. "You'll be okay, won't you?" I tilted my head. The question surprised me, but at the same time it didn't. "I will," I said. She sighed, almost in relief. "All right." There was nothing left to say. No apologies that could fix the past. No words that could undo what had already been done. So I simply said, "Goodbye, Margaret." And then I hung up. Lily immediately leaned in. "Okay, what the hell was that about?" I let out a slow breath, setting my phone down. Margaret finally seeing her son for who he really is. Lily hummed. "A little late, but hey, better late than never." She raised her glass. "Now, can we please focus on the fact that you're officially free?" I smiled, picking up my drink again. For the first time in years, I truly felt it. I was free. The streets were quieter when we left the bar, the air crisp against my skin as I pulled my coat tighter around me. The night felt different, lighter. Like something invisible had been lifted off my shoulders, something I hadn't even realized had been weighing me down for so long. Lily walked beside me, humming softly, her heels clicking against the pavement. You know, she said, stuffing her hands into her pockets, I half expected you to break down crying in the bathroom at some point tonight. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Not happening. She turned to look at me, her expression softer now. I mean it, Emma. You really okay? I thought about it for a moment. I had spent years living in a lie, convincing myself that if I just waited, if I just held on a little longer, maybe, things would fix themselves. That the man I had loved would wake up one day and choose to be better. But tonight I had shattered that illusion for good. I had watched the truth unravel, watched Ethan squirm under the weight of his own lies. And for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I was holding my breath. I nodded. Yeah. I really think I am. Lily nudged me with her elbow. Good. Because you, my dear, are a total badass. We reached my car and I leaned against the driver's side door, letting the cold metal press against my back. Lily hesitated before speaking again. So, you think he's gonna fight the divorce? I exhaled, tilting my head up to the sky. That was the one thing I hadn't been entirely sure of. Ethan had always been the type to want control. To twist situations, manipulate them until they worked in his favor. But tonight I had seen something in his eyes I never had before. Fear. Not fear of losing me. That part had been gone long before tonight. No, this was the fear of losing everything. His reputation. His image. The perfect life he had built on a foundation of deception. I turned my gaze back to Lily. No, I said simply. He knows he's already lost. He grinned. Damn right he has. I unlocked the car and opened the door, but before I could get in my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call. Just a text. Blocked number. Emma, please. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a moment, my lips pressing into a thin line. Lily leaned over my shoulder. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I took a deep breath, my thumb hovering over the message. Then without hesitation I deleted it. Lily whistled. Cold. I love it. I smirked, slipping into the driver's seat. Let's get out of here. As I started the engine, I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to feel something. Regret. Sadness. Doubt. But there was none. For the first time in years I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward. Morning sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, casting long golden streaks across the floor. I blinked against the brightness, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar feeling of peace. No tension curled in my stomach. No dread sat heavy on my chest. Just quiet. For the first time in years I woke up alone, and it wasn't loneliness I felt. It was relief. I stretched, the sheets cool against my skin, before sitting up and reaching for my phone. No missed calls. No messages. Just silence. Ethan had finally given up, or at least had stopped trying to reach me. It should have felt like closure. But then the doorbell rang. I hesitated, my fingers tightening around my phone. No one was supposed to come by today. No one except. I exhaled sharply, throwing back the covers. The second ring came as I reached the front door. A part of me already knew who it was before I even looked through the peephole. Ethan. His hair was disheveled, his suit wrinkled like he hadn't slept. He stood with his hands in his pockets, shifting on his feet, his jaw tight. When I finally pulled the door open, he exhaled in relief. Emma. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed over my chest. Ethan. He ran a hand through his hair, letting out a slow breath. I didn't know if you'd answer. I arched a brow. And yet here you are. He swallowed hard. Can we talk? I studied him, taking in the exhaustion lining his face, the way his hazel eyes searched mine for something. Sympathy, understanding, a chance. It was almost laughable. Talk. I repeated. You mean like how you should have talked to me 5 years ago? His jaw clenched. I know I screwed up. He exhaled sharply, looking down before meeting my gaze again. I just need you to understand. I tilted my head, waiting. I never wanted to hurt you, he continued, voice quieter now. I swear, Emma, I never meant for it to happen like this. I scoffed. Right. You just accidentally had an affair for 5 years. He flinched. It wasn't. He cut himself off, sighing heavily. I made mistakes. You made choices. He pressed his lips together, his hands curling into fists. I'm not here to fight. Then why are you here, Ethan? Silence. His throat bobbed as he swallowed. I guess I just needed to see if you still. His voice trailed off, his eyes searching mine again. I stared at him for a long moment, letting the words hang between us. There was a time when that look, that hesitation might have been enough to break me. When the part of me that had once loved him would have softened, given him the chance to explain, to twist things back into his favor. But that time had passed. I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. Do you know what the worst part of all this was? His brows furrowed. Emma. It wasn't the betrayal, I continued, my voice even. It wasn't the lies. It wasn't even the fact that you thought you could keep it hidden from me for so long. I watched his face carefully, saw the way his jaw tightened. The worst part, I said, was realizing that the man I married never actually existed. He inhaled sharply. For years I thought I knew you. I thought we were building something real. But the man I loved? The man I trusted? I let out a humorless chuckle. He was never real. Just a mask you wore while you played your little game. Ethan's eyes darkened. That's not fair. I arched a brow. Isn't it? A beat of silence passed before he ran a frustrated hand over his face. I don't know what you want me to say. I shook my head. I don't want you to say anything, Ethan. I just want you to leave. His breath hitched slightly, and for the first time, I saw something almost like fear flash across his face. He took a half step forward, but I held up a hand. Don't. He stopped. I exhaled slowly. You lost Ethan. And no amount of words is going to change that. His lips parted like he wanted to say something else, but nothing came. For once he had nothing left to manipulate. Nothing left to twist. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded. Just once. Then he turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go. I just closed the door. And I never let him back in. The sound of the door clicking shut echoed in the quiet house. I pressed my forehead against the wood for a moment, inhaling deeply before exhaling the last remnants of whatever weight Ethan had tried to leave with me. He was gone. For good. I turned away, my feet carrying me toward the kitchen almost on autopilot. The clock on the stove read 8:32 a.m., but it felt much later. The morning had already drained me, but at the same time, there was a strange energy humming in my veins. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. I grabbed a mug, poured myself some coffee, and leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the world beyond. It looked the same. The trees still swayed in the morning breeze. The sun still painted golden streaks across the pavement. Nothing outside had changed. But inside, everything was different. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. My first instinct was irritation. If Ethan had come back, if he thought there was still something left to say, I would make sure he regretted it. But when I pulled the door open, it wasn't him. Lily stood there, sunglasses perched on her nose, holding a bag of pastries in one hand and a bottle of champagne in the other. Tell me you're not still moping, she said, pushing past me and stepping inside like she owned the place. I let out a soft laugh, shaking my head. I wouldn't call it moping. She set the bag down on the counter, pulled off her sunglasses, and gave me a pointed look. Then what would you call it? I thought for a moment. Processing. Lily nodded approvingly. Good. Because today is officially step one of your new life. And what better way to start than with carbs and champagne? She popped the bottle before I could respond, filling 2 glasses before handing one to me. I raised an eyebrow. It's barely 9 in the morning. He grinned. Exactly. If there's ever been a time for celebratory breakfast mimosas, this is it. I clinked my glass against hers. To new beginnings. To you, she corrected. To finally being free of that cheating bastard. The first sip was smooth, the bubbles fizzing against my lips. I took a deep breath, setting the glass down. I saw him this morning, I said. Lily stilled mid-bite. Ethan. I nodded. She set the pastry down slowly. And I shrugged. He wanted to talk. Lily scoffed. Of course he did. Men always want to talk when it's too late. I let out a dry laugh. Yeah. He thought I'd listen. Thought I'd give him a chance to explain. She leaned forward, eyes bright with anticipation. And what did you do? I told him to leave. Her grin widened. And he left. Lily let out a dramatic sigh, clutching her chest. God, that is so satisfying. I smirked. It really was. She studied me for a moment, something softer in her expression now. You look different, you know. I frowned. Different how? She tilted her head. Lighter. Like you can actually breathe. I took another sip of my drink, considering her words. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was what it felt like to finally be free. I glanced around the house. The space that had once been ours but was now only mine. It looked the same, but it felt new. A blank canvas waiting for me to decide what to do with it. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't scare me. It excited me. The days that followed were quiet in a way I wasn't used to. No forced conversations over dinner. No waiting for Ethan to come home late with another excuse. No lingering tension pressing against my ribs. The silence wasn't heavy, it was freeing. I spent the first morning alone walking through the house, taking in every inch of the space that had once felt like a prison. The framed wedding photos on the mantel? Gone. His clothes in the closet? Packed and waiting for him to come pick them up. Not that I cared if he ever did. Lily had insisted on helping me purge the past, which mostly meant drinking wine while she cheered me on for every item of Ethan's that I threw into a donation pile. By the time the sun set, the house felt different. That night, I sat on the couch with a book in my lap, the lamp casting a soft glow around the room. I should have felt alone. I should have felt sad. Glad I felt whole. My phone buzzed on the table beside me. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was Lily checking in again. But when the screen lit up, my stomach twisted. Margaret. I hesitated for only a second before answering. Hello. There was a pause followed by a soft sigh. Emma. I leaned back against the couch. Margaret. Another silence stretched between us before she spoke again. Ethan came by today. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he did. I assume he told you about our conversation? I asked. Yes. She exhaled slowly. I won't lie to you, I never thought I'd see my son in this state. I said nothing. He's broken, she continued as if that mattered. I don't think he realized how much he was losing until it was too late. I let out a quiet laugh. That sounds like a him problem. Margaret sighed again. I'm not calling to defend him. He did this to himself. Her voice softened. I wanted to say I'm sorry. That caught me off guard. Margaret had always defended Ethan, always made excuses for him, always looked at me with mild disapproval whenever I questioned anything about our marriage. And now she was apologizing. I should have seen it, she admitted. I should have known something wasn't right. But I didn't want to believe my son was capable of this. I ran a hand through my hair, letting her words settle. I know it doesn't change anything, she said. But I wanted you to know that I don't blame you for leaving. You did what you had to do. A part of me wanted to ask if she was calling because she hoped I'd reconsider, that I'd find some way to forgive Ethan. But another part of me knew she had already accepted the truth. So I simply said, thank you. Margaret cleared her throat. I won't call again, Emma. I wanted to say that. Goodbye, Margaret. She hesitated. Goodbye, dear. The call ended and I set the phone down, staring at the darkened screen. Maybe Margaret wasn't a bad person. Maybe she had just been blind the way I had been once. But I wasn't blind anymore. And I never would be again. The day the divorce was finalized, I didn't feel a sudden rush of victory or an overwhelming wave of emotion. There was no dramatic moment of realization, no grand sense of closure. Instead, there was just peace. I signed the papers in the quiet office of my attorney, the sound of the pen scratching against paper marking the official end of something that had already been dead for a long time. Ethan wasn't there. He had signed his part separately, as if avoiding me would somehow make it easier to accept what he had lost. When I stepped outside, the air was crisp, the sunlight warm against my skin. Felt like the first real day of my life. Lily was waiting for me by my car, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. She grinned when she saw me, handing me one without a word. I took a sip, sighing as the warmth settled in my chest. It's done. She tilted her head. How do you feel? I thought about it for a second. Light. Lily smiled. Good. You deserve to feel light. We stood there for a moment, watching the world move around us. People hurried past, cars zipped down the street, life continued. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't stuck in the past. I was ready to move forward. That night, I sat on my balcony, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. The house was quiet, but it wasn't an empty quiet. It was mine. Every inch of it belonged to me, no longer tainted by the ghost of a man who had once tried to make me believe in a life that had never been real. I didn't regret what I had done. I didn't regret waiting, didn't regret making him feel the same kind of humiliation and betrayal he had made me endure. But most of all, I didn't regret leaving. I had spent too many years trapped in someone else's game, waiting for a version of Ethan that never existed. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was living. And this was just the beginning.